The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The election aftershock. What's next for America?
Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream.
Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead.
Follow the money. Our state gets a new comptroller.
3 billionaires who think that our democracy is for sale. Well, they were wrong.
And disabled veteran Tammy Duckworth is sent to fight in Washington after beating incumbent Mark Kirk. These stories and much more tonight on In the Loop.
Good evening, I'm Chris Bury. The most amazing upset in modern political history is still sinking in. Donald Trump rode a wave of working-class discontent to an electoral college victory. Here in Illinois, Hillary Clinton won the state. Indeed, she won the popular vote nationwide. But after a bitter campaign, the country and the state are more divided than ever. That raises the question, where do we go from here? Our Lauren Cohn has more.
Thank you, Chris. And from the candidates to the general public, people are still reeling from the outcome of the presidential election, and it's unclear what to expect for the next 4 years. But here in Illinois, the picture is more clear. I was there when it all unfolded Tuesday night.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
It was the slap to the political establishment heard around the globe. Donald Trump elected as America's 45th president.
Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
But after a vicious campaign where Trump alienated so many people with his racist and offensive comments, Chicago Tribune reporter Hal Dardick says bringing people together will be his greatest challenge.
A lot of divisions in the country between educated, non-educated, minorities, whites, and a lot of wounds to heal. And can he do that? Will he temper the rhetoric? Will his way of governing be less divisive?
The Trump surprise victory shocked even his biggest supporters, including these millennials who just moved to Chicago.
Deep down, I was a big Trump supporter. I didn't think he can pull it off, but seeing the upsets in Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, the tides have turned.
But I think everyone's kind of, asking for change. I think the early polls kind of showed Hillary way ahead, and I think when it came down to it and everyone started voting, I think it kind of showed what the country's looking for.
Here in Illinois, a different picture as Democrats won key races. State Representative Tammy Duckworth, who upset incumbent Republican Mark Kirk for the U.S. Senate seat, is now taking her platform to make college more affordable and to protect America's veterans to Washington.
And I will work every day to make sure our veterans are getting the best care and receiving the benefits we promised them.
But some people have questioned whether she did enough when she was in the Obama administration working for the Veterans Administration in this country. So a lot of Republicans are still going to perhaps take her to task for that, but I think that they'll take her at face value because of her heroism and try to work with her, and I think she can potentially be a leader.
The most expensive race in Illinois, the special election for Illinois comptroller, became a costly proxy war between Governor Bruce Rauner and House Speaker Michael Madigan. Democrat Susana Mendoza's defeat of Republican Leslie Munger could spell trouble for the governor.
Do you think you're going to be able to get along with Governor Rauner?
I can get along with anyone. So I can get along with anyone, but I'm also willing to stand up to anyone, regardless of how powerful or how much money they have.
In the North Suburban 10th Congressional District, Democrat Brad Schneider upset Republican Bob Dole, taking back the seat he lost to Dole 2 years ago. An example of a race where a Trump win didn't help the incumbent Republican.
I think it says a lot about that district and the fact that it's a blue state, and the Democrats going to win in a presidential year when the people really turn out for the presidential vote.
And what we saw here in Illinois, Chris, is that the GOP did take 4 seats in the House, 2 in the Senate, still though Madigan has the majority.
You know, here in Illinois, we saw Republicans running away from Donald Trump, including Kirk, Senator Kirk. What effect did that have altogether on the race?
You know, it's interesting because if you look at the Dold-Schneider race, which was very close, Dold is a moderate Republican, but the Trump effect didn't help Dold here. It's a presidential election year. Hillary Clinton won Illinois. That looks like it was a boost to Schneider.
And even Governor Rauner tried not to mention Trump's name. Has he said anything since the election?
He said he doesn't want to comment on the election. You know, what was interesting is way back when he said, I'm going to vote for the Republican nominee, he was then put in all these ads that we saw on television that were sort of distorted, and it looked like Governor Rauner was affiliated or in support of Trump. It was a little bit misleading during the campaign, but so far now, he doesn't want to comment on the election.
As you pointed out in your story, so much money, so few races, only about 15 contested races, something like $60 million.
Right.
At the end of the day, what did that money buy?
Well, and that's what's interesting, because can money affect races? We saw, yes, it can. Can it buy an election? Well, he gave a lot of money to Leslie Munger, and it didn't help her in the comptroller race. So it's really interesting because both sides had money. The governor poured a lot in. His friends gave him a lot of money. But in the end, it didn't help him in Springfield.
All right, Lauren, thank you very much. Many people across the country and right here in Chicago were stunned by the results of the presidential election. A day after the race, we headed downtown to hear what some area residents had to say.
I was thinking last night, you know, I really was looking forward to, I have a little girl, I wanted to tell her that a woman could be president, and now this happened, so it's pretty disappointing for me.
I'm hoping that he can be or come to a point where he can unify our country. There's a deep divide. I haven't seen that in him previously.
Everyone says let's get together, but I think it's just going to be the status quo and everything's going to stay the same. It's going to be divided, and hopefully we get to a point where we come to some sort of agreement, but I think it's just going to be the same.
It's a shame that we as Americans have done this. This is one of the laws of American people. To choose somebody with those kind of beliefs, with those kind of ideas, is a low standard for American people.
And now joining us are Mike Noonan, founder and partner with the Roosevelt Group, Lyssa Christman with Seraphin and Associates, and Tony Arnold, political reporter with WBEZ Radio. And welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mike, let me start with you. Is this election of Donald Trump the political stunner of a lifetime?
Yes, quite frankly, it is. I knew that Mr. Trump had an opportunity, but the way things were looking, especially when Comey retracted what he said,
head of the FBI, Mike Comey.
Yes, that I thought that Hillary was definitely going to win on Tuesday. So I was definitely.
It was such a divided election, Lyssa. When you look at Illinois, deep blue state, Chicago City goes 85% for Clinton. Even the collar counties go for Clinton. But you look downstate, outside of maybe Champaign and East St. Louis, deep red. Is Illinois every bit as divided as the rest of the country?
Well, it is, especially if you even go back to the Quinn-Rauner election where Governor Quinn won Cook County, yet Rauner won the rest of the state. It's very indicative of what this state is. It's a divided country. And clearly by the election, with Hillary winning the popular vote, but Trump winning the electoral vote, the country is still divided. And quite frankly, the president-elect and Secretary Clinton both said we need to come together, and it's never a more prominent time to come together because taxpayers voted. They wanted change. They didn't want, no offense to our friends across the pond, they didn't want a coronation of the Clintons. They didn't want a coronation of Jeb Bush because he was out early. So this is a real wake-up call for everyone to say the country needs change and they want change.
I think also that I've seen studies that Illinois is a microcosm of how the country looks, with the urban side of it, the suburban part of it, and then the rural part of Illinois. It is a microcosm of how this country looks, and you see that reflected from the state. Although our neighbors around the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, all ended up going in a very different way without Chicago's urban center. You know, that is what carried Clinton through this election, that and the suburban vote.
And we're already seeing, of course, demonstrations. Mike, here in Chicago, we've seen anti-Trump demonstrations. We've seen them in Orlando and New York City and in New Orleans. How difficult is it going to be in the wake of this discontent for the new Republican majority to govern?
Well, I think that the people need to just exercise their frustration. A lot of people were not, most everybody was not expecting President Trump. And so when that kind of surprise happens, people need to get it out. And I think the fact that they're out demonstrating now is a good thing for our democracy, and it shows that we have a potential to move forward. The real question is whether President Trump wants to govern for all people, or he wants to stick to the talking points that he used during the campaign, which divided America so much, right? Banning Muslims, building the wall in Mexico, getting rid of Obamacare. These are policy positions that he stated in the election that a lot of people are hoping he's going to moderate from. We'll see. We'll see if he sticks with the far right wing of the Republicans in Washington and goes their own way and the moderate Republicans leave him, or if he's able to bring everybody together. I do think it was a good sign that he led on Tuesday saying that he wanted to rebuild America and invest in infrastructure, because that's an issue that you can find consensus with amongst all members of Congress, and so that might be a good place for him to start.
Here in Illinois, Senator Kirk was the very first senator in the United States Senate to disavow Donald Trump. He wrote in David Petraeus, the former head of the CIA. Lisa, what do you think about that Trump impact on Kirk? Did it, at the end of the day, help or hurt him, or was it a wash?
I think it was a wash because clearly the state, again, is divided. And the Democrats threw everything they had in the kitchen sink into Tammy Duckworth's campaign because they saw the vulnerability of Senator Kirk early on in his recovery from the stroke, in some gaps, verbal gaps that missteps that he had. The Democrats really, really, really helped Duckworth out on this. I don't think Trump had an issue on Senator Kirk one way or the other. It was a foregone conclusion early on that he was probably not going to win. Numbers fluctuated a little bit, but clearly the Democratic help surely catapulted Duckworth.
So, Tony, for the senator-elect, Tammy Duckworth, what role is she going to play in a minority with the minority leader, Dick Durbin, in this new Trump era?
Yeah, Illinois does have this senator in leadership in Dick Durbin, who's been there for a while now. I think it's going to be something to see how we're already hearing stories about how Republicans in D.C. are a little fractured and they're not quite sure about who their leadership is going to be. I've seen a few stories about if Paul Ryan's still going to be Speaker. So I expect Democrats to respond to that by trying to be as unified as possible. We've obviously seen some fractures within the Democratic Party that played out in the primary this year. It played out in Chicago's mayor's election last year, and so I think for Duckworth, what her role is going to be is just going to be with the Democratic Party that's going to try to be coming up with some sort of unified force that stays together to, oppose the Republican majority in both the Senate, the House, and the White House.
And if I could add to that, Tony, I think that you're right that the Democratic Party is going to try to stay unified, but I think they're going to face a real struggle. Almost 50% of union households nationwide voted for Donald Trump. The unions are one of the main sources of funds for the Democratic Party, and you can, over the last 20 years, the SEIU, very liberal side of the union movement, has sort of taken the lead, and the construction trades have followed along. But when we look at the election returns, the construction trade unionists, those families are the ones who voted for Trump. And it's going to be difficult, I believe, for their leadership to continue to push millions and millions of dollars against a candidate that the vast majority of their members were supporting. So it's going to be a real challenge, I think, for the Democrats to hold that coalition of disparate voices together.
Listen, I want to get your take on the point that Mike raised, which is if there is a unifying issue, and given that the trade unions, some of them went for Trump, is building infrastructure something that the Democratic Congress and the new president can agree on, sort of a stimulus Trump style?
That is it. We alluded to it earlier when we were talking off camera too. That is the number one thing that is a unifying factor. Put a strong infrastructure bill together that creates jobs, that creates money for corporations, that gets people back on working again, that creates the roads and the buildings that this country desperately needs. I mean, even our rails we have rail cars that should be getting AARP benefits right now. Our infrastructure is so weak that everyone can agree on putting people back to work and giving companies money to do that.
Tony, let's take a look at a congressional race up on the North Shore, the 10th Congressional District, which seems to flip back and forth between Dole and Schneider. Schneider, the Democrat, wins. What role did Trump have in that race up on the North Shore?
I think the role that Trump had is really the role that the presidential race has on that race. If it's a president on the ballot, Democrats win that district. If it's a midterm election, Republicans win. And that's now flip-flopped between the same candidates for every election that we've had for the last 3 times. So that race, I don't know if Trump was the factor. It certainly was a factor for TV ads. Dole felt necessary to run ads saying, kind of chuckling at how nasty the presidential race was, to say, forget about that, vote for me. And then
he tried to separate himself from Trump.
Yeah. And whether that worked or not, well, it clearly didn't work as a strategy because he lost. I think it was just Democrats turned out in that district for Schneider, because there's a higher turnout for voters overall in presidential years.
Listen, why do you think that keeps going back and forth between the two?
Those voters have got to be very confused in that district. Who's my representative now?
Well, it's an evenly divided area, and so because of the electoral trends, like Tony mentioned, where the Democrats have a higher turnout in presidential elections, that's what really plays into it. But I did want to bring something up from before about Kirk separating from Trump, and did that help Kirk or did that help Dole? No, but I do believe that it really helped Donald Trump. The fact that the Republican, so many Republican establishment folks, from Lindsey Graham and Paul Ryan on down, who were not saying good things about Trump for the most part, I think gave the voters who are looking for change and who are angry with the establishment another reason to support Trump. Because if all the folks in Washington who've broken the system are against him, that's why folks, I think, went for him. So it was these politicians tried to position themselves so that they wouldn't get the taint of Trump on them, is how they viewed it. But in reality, what they were doing was taking their taint away from Trump and giving him the credentials that he needed amongst all these voters who aren't regular participants in the electoral process.
And now they have to work together. And now, no matter what party you're on, now everyone has to give Trump the ability to try and govern and to start with a blank slate. Because unfortunately, Obama really never had that ability to govern well.
Because he never had both houses of Congress.
Right. And so now all the Republicans have to come together, whether you like him or not, and give him a chance.
Well, he did have it for the first 2 years, and that's when he was able to get Obamacare through. But then
not the House, right?
No, he had the House and the Senate from 2008 to for his first 2 years, and then the wave came in 2010 and took Pelosi out, and a reaction to Obamacare and also the standard party.
So the window may be very, very, very brief here for Trump.
Right.
One other big race that we should talk about, Tony, is the Illinois comptroller. It was a pretty close race, closer than some of these other races. And here money was a factor. By some reports, about $6 million poured into this race.
Even more than that, yeah.
More than that.
I think what stood out to me about the results of the comptroller's race, Susana Mendoza, the Chicago city clerk and the Democrat, won. She beat the incumbent Leslie Munger. This was a special election, technically, because Judy Bartopinka, who won this race 2 years ago, died shortly after winning the election. So this was a special election so that
Munger had never been elected.
Munger's appointment by Bruce Rauner wouldn't be a 4-year term. And I think Democrats knew that they had a good shot of picking this up if it were held in a presidential year. That said, the difference between the results is that Mendoza got a little bit less of the statewide vote than Clinton or Duckworth did. And so if you're looking at what was different between that race and these other races, it was a lot of ads that were run against Mendoza, tying her to House Speaker Michael Madigan, who has very low popularity in this state. And it's clear wasn't enough to stop Mendoza from winning, but there was a drop-off there, about 5 percentage points from what Clinton got to what Mendoza got.
And if I can jump on that, Madigan's approval rating right now is 18%. Blagojevich's was 13% before he went to prison. But if you go back to the Madigan effect, On the flip side of that, the amount of money that the Republicans put into their races, we were talking, they centralized on one theme, anti-Madigan, and tie everything to Madigan. When you have one theme, keep it simple, stupid, people tend to resonate on that, and it clearly helped. In 4 of the 6 targeted races that the Republicans went after in the House, they won 4 seats.
But not in a controller race, though, right? All that money.
No, but so if you think about it,
one would argue that it did help. It just wasn't effective enough, right? Because Mendoza did underperform the Clinton and Duckworth numbers by, I think it was more like 10% than 5%. So she did underperform, and what would be the difference, right? Some might say there was other contributing factors, ethnicity in that as well. But I think that the consensus would be that that constant barrage of anti-Madigan again with Mendoza, plus all the ads that were anti-Madigan for all the legislative races, was a cumulative effect to drive her numbers down.
What does it mean now that we have a controller who is allied with Madigan and not with the governor? What's that going to mean in Springfield?
Well, the comptroller signs the checks when there's checks to sign. Right now, we're about to wrap up what's left of this short-term spending plan that was approved 6 months ago. That was the one agreement that Rauner and the Democrats have had in Springfield, and that money is about to expire. So we're going to go through this all over again, this whole budget fight here in the next month. And the comptroller does play an important role because whatever they do agree on ends up going to her to prioritize what money goes out the door first. And when you're in the fiscal condition that Illinois is,
which is bad,
then that does matter what money goes out the door first.
Chris, I just want to point out that even within the national election and the reflection on Illinois, the Paul Simon Institute issued a poll. 85% of Illinoisans want congressional remapping, redistricting changed. They're fed up. This was not only a voice in Illinois, it was a voice across the country that people are fed up with the norm, that they want change. And whether it was Mendoza winning over Munger or the Republicans taking some Democratic seats away in the House, Illinois is reflective of the country. The country wants change.
At the end of the day, as we heard in Lauren Cohn's piece, Mike, Republicans picked up 6 seats. Democrats lost a supermajority. In practical terms, does this mean more is going to get done in Springfield?
I think it creates a opening and an opportunity. Whether or not Governor Rauner, Speaker Madigan, President Cullerton take that opportunity, it's unclear. One of the things that's important to remember, though, in addition to the Democrats, the Democrats lost seats from I-80 South plus 1 in McHenry County, all areas where Trump did well. But they didn't pick up any seats in all the areas where Clinton did well, DuPage County, Lake County, suburban Chicago. So it does make one think that there were specific factors beyond the presidential headwinds that affected these races. Whether or not the Democrats decide it's time to work with the governor on certain provisions of his turnaround agenda, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm hopeful, though, that both sides have realized that, they made statements yesterday that they wanted to work together. I'm hopeful that they'll decide to do that. We start next week in Springfield.
This is a big win for Leader Durkin, too. It gives him more fuel to his engine to try and create more change and bring more bargaining power.
Tony, you cover this beat regularly. What do you see?
I see a campaign that, for as much as we talked about the money spent against Mendoza and the money that was spent by Republicans against Democratic incumbents, you total that together and it's about 30 to 40, maybe even more than that, $1 million total. And one person had a cameo in every one of these ads, and it was House Speaker Michael Madigan. When you have that much money being spent, not just against these Democrats, but also Michael Madigan, how do you think Madigan's feeling about the person who was behind a lot of that money, Bruce Rauner? I don't think. We'll see what happens here. Maybe there will be some sort of, we can't let this keep going, but I don't know if Madigan's going to be inclined to be giving Rauner any big wins here in the short term.
Just a few seconds left. Hopeful or not about Springfield?
I'm always hopeful. You got to stay hopeful. I'm a Bears fan.
Listen, last word.
I'm absolutely hopeful. This means change. It's been a long time coming, out with the old and with the new.
All right, on that note, we have to wrap it up. Thank you to our guests, Lissa Druss-Christman, Mike Noonan, and Tony Arnold. As we honor our service members this Veterans Day, we look to one Chicago veteran whose athletic ability has taken her around the world
inspiring many along the way.
I was 24 years old. I had images of a Humvee, a cracked windshield, and a lot of blood. And as I laid there in that Baghdad ER, I knew that my life was forever changed.
Melissa Stockwell lost her leg in 2004, becoming the first American female soldier to lose a limb in combat.
After I lost my leg, I looked to others to kind of see what they could do, and I thought, okay, if they can do that and they're missing their leg, well, then I can do that too.
As a longtime athlete, Stockwell soon returned to a life of sports. And in 2011, she co-founded a para-triathlon club in Chicago called Dare to Try. Its mission to help disabled children, adults, and service members discover their true potential through triathlon, a demanding sport that combines swimming, cycling, and running.
I'm a disabled veteran, and they had a military camp a year or two ago, and a friend encouraged me to go and participate, and it got me strung out on triathlon.
But Dare to Try's impact stretches far beyond the finish line and into the hearts of athletes when they need it most.
I was injured on the job as a New York State Trooper, so I needed to heal physically and emotionally. When I heard of a kids camp, I'm like, I would definitely love to be involved in that, because I know as an adult how much this camp meant to me. I would imagine that it's an amazing experience for young kids.
Volunteers come from across the country to help train children and young adults ages 6 to 21. This year's summer camp served about 40 of them. They came with a wide range of physical disabilities.
We have spinal cord injuries, so athletes in wheelchairs. We have someone missing their arm or their leg or some sort of other amputation. We have visual impairment, so any sort of physical disability.
They're able to be around people that they can relate to, where they're not being bullied, and it's just a great experience. No one making fun of them because of the disabilities that they have.
Team number 1! I've been doing triathlon for a while now on my own. And my vision kind of got in the way, so this is gonna get me going now, get me going to my top speed.
We help provide them with the adaptive equipment, with the coaching, with the training, but they can get to that finish line, get a medal around their neck, and they can be triathletes.
At home in Chicago, Stockwell's passion and patriotism had her training for a medal of her own. Then came the call that confirmed her place on the first para-triathlon team in Rio.
Yes! Yes! I've been doing triathlon since 2009, and to be able to, go and represent our country on the world's biggest stage is pretty amazing.
And amazing it was. Team USA swept the competition. Stockwell won her first Paralympic bronze medal. Alongside her stood two of her friends, both Dare to Try athletes who helped bring home the silver and gold.
Our motto is one inspires many, but in my case, it's many inspire one.
Inspiring folks. That's going to do it for this week's show. Tune in next week when we take a closer look at Cook County's cash bail system and concussions in youth sports. Join us for these stories and more next week. Until then, for Lauren Cohn, I'm Chris Bury. Good night.